Hello, welcome back to the afternoon session. Hope everyone had a good break. Before we continue with the presentations, we would like to remind you that each speaker has 12 minutes for their presentations. When there 1 minute remaining, we will kindly let them know so they can start wrapping up. After both the speakers have finished, we'll have 6-minute sessions for a Q&A, a question and answer. We kindly ask everyone to be mindful of time, as once the session concludes, we must move on to the next block. All right, let's get started. First, we would like to welcome Katie Marks and Catherine Bolrat with their presentation entitled From Punta Arenas to Hobart, an action research project to support youth engagement in Antarctica in gateway cities. Welcome, Katie. Welcome, Catherine. The floor is yours.
Hello, Katie and Catherine. Is it possible that you are able to initiate your video camera?
Hi there, I can't start my camera at the moment because it says it's been blocked by the host, but Katie will be starting the presentation. I'll be jumping in partway through, so I'll just wait for her to begin.
Okay, perfect. So now you should be able to start your camera.
All right, fantastic. Hi, everyone. Yeah, no, I will be jumping in partway through the slide. I have a 2-minute slot in the presentation.
Now you should be able to initiate your presentation, and also Katie, you can also turn on your camera if you'd like right now. And so whenever you're ready, you can share your presentation and you'll have 12 minutes.
I think Katie is struggling with her microphone. She'll be able to start it in a second.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Hi, thank you everybody. Sorry, it wasn't letting me unmute, access my video, or access the chat for several minutes. But now it seems I can communicate, so good morning or good evening, depending on where you're coming from. Let me just share the screen. Attempt to share the screen. Sorry. Okay, can everybody see?
Yes.
Fabulous.
We can
Okay,
see.
well, welcome to this presentation. I've actually just lost my notes, but we'll deal with that. So my name's Katie Marks. I'm here presenting on behalf of some colleagues, including Elizabeth Lean, Katia Macias Diaz, Georgie Branch from the City of Hobart, as well as Kat Volrath, who you'll meet in a couple of minutes. So today's presentation is really just to introduce a project which is in its beginning stages, which is designed to help foster a sense of youth custodianship in Antarctic gateway cities. In particular, for these cities, we're focusing today on the city of Hobart here in Lutruwita, Tasmania, as well to a different degree, the city of Punta Arenas in Chile. So the project we're talking about today has its origins in an earlier project, which some of you may have heard of, known as the Antarctic Cities Project. So this was a wide-ranging, multi-partnered project that took place really between 2017 and 2021. That project aimed to really deepen the idea of gateway cities and custodianship within the gateways by working with each city to highlight the interconnectedness between the cities and also the connectedness which each city has with Antarctica. We had a number of different outputs in that project, which included surveys in and across the cities, which notably showed that younger people in the cities felt, they cared strongly about Antarctica's future, but felt ill-informed about Antarctica and didn't have much hope in terms of Antarctica's environmental future. We also ran a youth expedition where one person or one young person from each of the 5 gateway cities, so from Hobart, from Christchurch, from Punta Arenas, from Ushuaia, as well as from Cape Town, with the help of ENACH, so the Chilean National Program, actually traveled down to Antarctica together with a research program team to workshop what became the beginnings of something called the Antarctic Youth Coalition. So the Antarctic Youth Coalition was an initiative designed to really start to activate youth Antarctic leadership in the gateway cities. 5 years on from that project, in the majority of cities, things were kicking along as normal, but I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to present with our Chilean hosts today, because the Chilean Antarctic Youth Coalition, particularly those located in Punta Arenas, took the idea of the Youth Coalition and ran with it, establishing what is today a thriving organization. In Hobart, we watched what they were doing and said, well, we'd like to be able to follow suit. We'd like to be able to follow this leadership. So we were able to launch a project this year with the assistance of the City of Hobart, so our local government, with the Antarctic Youth Coalition in Punta Arenas, and with the support of the Australian Government's Council on Australia-Latin American Relationships, to start to build an Antarctic Youth Coalition here in Hobart. So this notably involved being able to employ Katia Macias Diaz, who was the founder of the Antarctic Youth Coalition in Punta Arenas, to help develop a group here in Hobart. And we really employed 4 pillars for this work. So number 1, we're aiming to be able to work with the Chilean AYC to establish this branch here in Hobart. We're aiming to provide subsidized Spanish language classes here in Hobart because we see language as a fundamental tool for connecting across the cities. We're really aiming to help to link emerging Antarctic leaders in the cities with the wider Antarctic sector and the people involved. And finally, we're going to be conducting an action research project to identify how we can best support youth engagement projects like this in the future. And today, we're going to talk about 2 of those particular aspects. So the establishment of the group and the action research project that we're wrapping around it. So for the first few slides, I'm actually going to invite one of our Antarctic Youth Coalition members, Kat Volras, to share the group story thus far. So Kat, over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I've been part of the Action Research Group and part of the AYC since it began here in Hobart, very fortunately, and I'll start with the recruitment process that we planned out. The recruitment process aimed to prioritize the idea that custodianship of Antarctica belongs to everyone, not just researchers. So to reflect that, we cast a really wide net across the UTAS campus and the Hobart community, using flyers and word of mouth to reach people. We also connected with other Antarctica-focused organizations to amplify our reach and build a broader and more inclusive network. From the beginning, our goal wasn't about just numbers, it was about finding really passionate and dedicated individuals who cared deeply about the future of Antarctica. Next slide. One of our first public-facing moments was at the Krill Party, which was held in collaboration with the Beaker Street Festival. This festival, for people who don't know, is an annual celebration of research and culture, including talks, pop-ups, and installations. Hobartica is an Antarctic-focused initiative of the festival that celebrates Hobart as one of the 5 Antarctic gateway cities. By tapping into Hobart's existing research and arts networks, we avoided reinventing the wheel and instead built on what was already thriving, allowing us to connect with a larger audience. This event underscored that visibility matters. It's not enough to talk about Antarctic issues in academic circles. We needed to build bridges between research and community and make stewardship something people can see themselves in. Next slide. Our first official meeting brought together a diverse group of members, including researchers, students, and artists. Although there were unsurprisingly a large proportion of people from a marine and Antarctic studies background, in the future, we would hope to grow the membership beyond researchers and students who already have an Antarctic focus in their fields. The benefit of such a diverse group is that it reinforces the AYC's mission to bring custodianship of Antarctica to everyone, and it allows interdisciplinary conversations. We explored the future connections with Punta Arenas and brainstormed ways to support cross-cultural collaboration. Like Katie mentioned, that included a strong interest in learning Spanish. That meeting set the tone for what the AYC is becoming, a space where bold ideas, diverse voices, and a shared commitment to Antarctica can come together.
Thank you very much, Kat. And Kat's first time presenting at this meeting or at this conference or at any conference, which in and of itself is a great outcome from this project thus far. So thank you, Kat. So
Thank you very much, Katie.
Well done. I want to talk briefly about the research methodologies that we're using on this project because it's a little bit of a highlight for us. So our broader question in doing this research is this, how can we best support grassroots engagement groups like the Antarctic Youth Coalition to establish and ideally thrive in gateway cities like Hobart? This is the type of research where we're hoping to learn whilst doing at the same time. We're also really working at the establishment phase here. So those two factors, coupled with the fact that we really wanted to be able to directly empower community members and particularly young members of the community, led us to choose what's called an action research methodology. So put simply, action research is a methodology predominantly developed within education and the social sciences, in which researchers team up with a research group from the wider community to investigate a key question together. This usually takes the form of workshops where you follow a format of planning an activity, observing what happens, reflecting on what you learn from that activity, and then redesigning or tweaking the activity to incorporate the lessons going forward. So the real focus here is on cross-dialogue, on collaboration, and very much on praxis and learning by doing. So to do this, we recruited a group of what we call an action research group. So this group comprises of some members of the Antarctic Youth Coalition itself. So you can see Kat here is one of our AYC members, as well as an action research group member, as well as partnership organizations from around the Hobart's Antarctic sector. So this includes people from the city of Hobart. It includes people from Beaker Street, which is our Antarctic focused festival here, as well as a number of other community stakeholders. We've planned 4 workshops over the course of the project, and the project itself is only 1 year, so we kind of have our work cut out for us. And it's following this model of planning an activity, taking action on the activity, observing what happens, and then reflecting and trying to kind of synthesize our learnings. Given that this is a new methodology for the Antarctic sector, and to our knowledge, it's the first time that this has been employed within Antarctic research. If there's somebody out there who can correct me if I'm wrong, please chime in because I'm keen to hear. We thought we'd share a little bit on what we've learned thus far when it comes to using this methodology. So there are a number of considerations we've come across. The first is in communicating uncertainty to our stakeholders. So one of the hallmarks of action research is that we try not to develop it too much without the input of our action research group and the wider community. That makes it difficult to, for example, say what we're going to be doing in advance because we need to do the workshops in order to co-design our approaches. That can make it difficult to get buy-in from people because they might say, well, what do you want me to be involved in? And you're like, well, we're going to get down and we can talk about the process, but we can't necessarily talk about the outcomes yet. Likewise, when we're talking with funding organizations, we again have to really emphasize the process and not necessarily be able to give a blow-by-blow account of our research activities in advance, which can be a challenge. Another thing we've noticed, particularly given that this is a short funded project, we only have 1 year, we've had to be quite strategic in where we invest time in the co-design process. So where we let the group make choices and develop activities, and where we step in and, for expediency's sake, make a decision in advance. And one key example there was we really chose the research question itself in advance, which ordinarily you might not do in an action research project, but if we hadn't, we probably would have had a delay of about 3 to 4 months in starting the project. So a lesson there is
Getty,
that the aspirations
it's
of action
1 minute
research
left.
do butt up against funding expediency sometimes. We've noticed the importance of reflexivity. So as researchers, we need to be watching ourselves constantly to ensure that we're providing platforms for other members of the community in this research process. We've also noticed that this type of research methodology has a high demand on the researcher's time, particularly in the initial stages. A lot of work had to go into designing the workshops to ensure that everybody would have the opportunity to get on board, understand what the objectives were, and have a say. Also, a lot of work goes in behind the scenes to, in an ongoing sense, kind of build the capacity of the wider group. But we think all of this is worth it because we've had some wonderful outcomes to date in terms of using this methodology. The first really being that co-designing our research approach with community allows us to really ensure that we have a fit-for-purpose research design. We're asking the right questions. We're using the right research methods to ensure that what we come out with will be something that will be usable by groups like the Antarctic Youth Coalition and by our community stakeholders in the future. It allows us to draw on a more diverse range of perspectives and expertises than we would have been able to access if it was just our traditional research team in the driver's seat. And fundamentally, it's allowed for some capacity building for our Action Research Group members, in particular our Action Antarctic Youth Coalition members, who many of them are Antarctic and marine studies students, are aspiring researchers in one way or another. This process, so attending these workshops, learning about what the research process looks like, has, I hope, supported people to step into new roles as Antarctic Youth Coalition leaders, but also to start to understand the fundamentals of research, which will hopefully set them up as researchers in the future. And I think that might be our time, which is wonderful because we're at an end. So thank you very much for your time today. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie and Catherine. We have one more presentation, and then we can continue with the Q&A. Now, we have Julia Lowe presenting the value of the participatory science program on Antarctic Travelers Experience. Welcome, Julia. Great to have you with us in this afternoon.
Now you should be able to unmute yourself, Julia.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, there we go. Like they said before, I'm Julia. I'm really excited to be here. I'm coming here from San Diego, California, and I'm really excited to learn from everybody here and share some of the work that I was doing in this past year. I just graduated with my master's from Scripps Institution of Oceanography, where I did a preliminary study for my thesis project on the value of participatory science programs on Antarctic travelers' experiences. So yeah, I'm excited to share it with you. So for a little background, I came into my program coming from a career in marine education at my local aquarium. And this all started because I was really thinking about how learning inspires connection, and connection then inspires care, especially when it comes to local ecosystems. And I was really curious how that applied to places that aren't local, like Antarctica, which is hard to reach for a lot of people. So I wondered about the best methods for facilitating learning about the natural world in a way that inspires this connection. One method of facilitating this connection is participatory science. This is a combination of community engagement and science. And participatory science programs are centered around the idea that you don't need formal scientific training to contribute to our knowledge of the natural world. So it's a partnership between non-scientists and scientists, and community members help gather data. You may have also heard the term citizen or community science. Language in America, at least, is shifting towards participatory science, so that's the language that I used for my project. So to better understand the role that participatory science played in connecting people with science, I looked into Fjord Phyto, which is a polar program that's an example of participatory science to the extreme. This program was conceptualized in 2016 by Dr. Maria Vernay and Dr. Allison Cusick, who is actually also speaking at this conference if anyone is curious about hearing more about Fjord Phyto. And this program engages travelers with these tiny creatures called phytoplankton that you may have heard of. But for some background, these are microscopic organisms that go largely unnoticed if you don't know about them. So these organisms are incredibly important. They not only are beautiful, but they photosynthesize, providing us with 50% of the Earth's oxygen. And they're also the foundation of the food chain for marine ecosystems. So they're very important. So through this program, travelers learn about phytoplankton and their importance all the way in Antarctica. And Fjord Phyto operates on 15 cruise ships traveling to and from the Antarctic Peninsula. So when traveling to Antarctica, visitors live aboard their cruise ship. For Fjord Phyto, travelers will leave on excursions on these small boats led by guides to collect phytoplankton. So the travelers will help with the collection process, and each group member has a task to help out with. Then once back aboard the ship, the samples are examined under a microscope. Ultimately, these samples are sent back to Scripps and the National University of La Plata in Argentina in order to monitor how melting glaciers affect these phytoplankton communities. So that's the whole process. But for the guests, after participating, they are asked to voluntarily take a survey about their experience with the program. So to further explore the roles that these kind of programs can play within the Antarctic tourism space, I analyzed the responses to these surveys to learn more about how people felt after participating. So overall, Fjord Phyto collected 257 surveys from participants between 2021 and 2025. These surveys were 2 pages containing questions about motivation for travel to Antarctica, knowledge of participatory science programs, the role of phytoplankton in the ecosystem, and also there were some questions about NASA ocean color research, because during this duration, the program was NASA funded. So for my specific project and my question, I just focused on analyzing 4 questions from this survey. So the first 2 were multiple choice, and they looked at participants' awareness of program opportunities and if there is an influence on the future trips that they would choose based on their experience. And the second 2 that I looked at were open-ended questions. They evaluated phytoplankton understanding, and then we also asked if there's anything else participants would like to share. So I'm going to take just a little bit of time diving into each of these 4 questions. So the first question I looked at was, prior to booking this trip, were you aware that participatory science programs would be available for you to participate in? I thought it was really unexpected that 2/3 of the participants didn't know that these programs would be available. which was really interesting because one of the expeditions that was surveyed was specifically advertised as a science trip to do participatory science. So I'm curious whether these answers may report higher awareness than usual. But I thought that this was really interesting, especially compared to those of question 2. So the second question that we asked was, in the future, will the availability of participatory science projects influence your decision to book one trip over another? When they think about their future vacations, trips, travel plans. So in this case, 2/3 of the respondents said that the availability of programs would influence their decision to book trips in the future. I did think it was unsurprising to see people respond with not sure, considering that people have different motivations for traveling and not all of them include participating in science. But I did think that this was valuable information, especially compared to the fact that 2/3 of the people that participated weren't aware that these programs were even an option. And then some people even expanded upon those 2 multiple choice questions in their other answers. So this one participant wrote, "I didn't even know there was an opportunity to get involved in science on this cruise when I booked it, but it's made the trip even more incredible to me. I've learned more and feel more connected to the research and the mission. I'll definitely be looking up how I can get involved in more citizen science in the future." So I thought this was really interesting. So I looked at 2 open-ended questions, very similar to this one. This is a side note, but this was a really fun part of my project because there was such a wide range of responses, and I expected some to be vague and some to be honest about their experience. But some were like extremely detailed, some made me laugh, some were super interesting, and some were so genuine, they made me feel very emotional. And some had very crazy handwriting. I had to even call my grandma to help me decipher them all. But I thought it was really interesting to sort through all of these and find patterns within the responses to these next 2 questions. So the third question was, briefly describe what phytoplankton means to you following your participation in Fjord Phyto. So I used qualitative analysis software Atlas TI to generate a word cloud, and all the words shown were mentioned at least 7 times across all the surveys. The larger words represent those that appeared more frequently across the responses. So it is important to note that this survey didn't have a pre-trip measure, so we can't compare the survey responses to anything to evaluate any sort of knowledge gain in a traditional sense, but we can look at if there was a perceived or reported knowledge gain based on the language of the responses. So I just thought this was really interesting. I highlighted terms that have to do with plankton's role in the food web. Words mentioned most frequently were food, chain, and ecosystem, and respondents demonstrated a perceived understanding of phytoplankton in relation to how important they were in the ecosystem. So I'm going to go past 2 things just so I don't run out of time. Because I want to get to my last question, which was, what else would you like to tell us about your experience participating in participatory science on this trip? So I analyzed this question thematically. So I created different categories of responses and looked at the major trends in those categories. So 2 trends that really stood out to me was appreciation for guides, which included guides' names, their abilities, or specific traits, or their influence on the experience. And the second main trend I noticed was this added meaning. This included responses that mentioned things like greater value gained because of their experience, or language like meaningful or powerful. So appreciation for guides, I just wanted to share some examples of each of these. One person wrote, "It opened up a learning experience on the trip, which I did not expect. Our guide was a fountain of information, and it made me want to read and learn more about Antarctica to have a better understanding." And another said it not only made the trip more meaningful, but it was fun to have a focus. Our citizen science coordinator was incredible. So these guides, I think it's really interesting because they normally possess expertise in polar science and also serve in multiple capacities like naturalists and leaders and educators. But I think really importantly, they can bridge this gap between science and everyday understanding. So,
Sorry to interrupt, Julia. You have 1 minute left.
oh, thank you. Okay, perfect. I'm almost done. My last trend that I looked at was this added meaning where respondents wrote, I just felt like I was able to contribute to science. It made the trip much more meaningful. And participating in this project made us feel like we're contributing to something worthwhile. It added depth to our Antarctic experience and made us more aware of how this region impacts the rest of the world. So I'll go towards my end. To conclude this, I really think that the hands-on education via participatory science could have the ability to facilitate connections between travelers and the place they visit, and helps this theme that really centered around my work, which was you have to know about it to care about it. The guides do more than just deliver the information. Oh, ending. Okay. They do more than just deliver the information, but they also kind of bridge this gap between the travelers and what they're seeing and what they're learning. So ultimately, if we want people to care about Antarctica and why it matters to people back at home, I think they have to learn about it. And programs like Fjord Fido could really help people learn together and have this experience. So yes, that is the ending. I just put in a thank you. These were my capstone advisors. And it was a big thanks to Fjord Fido because I was able to use their data. Dr. Alison Cusick, Dr. Hannah Nielsen, and Haha Hamano helped make this possible. And yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you. And sorry for going over time.
Oh, no problem, Julia. Thank you. Thank you to you for this really interesting presentation.
Yes, Julia, thank you so much. Thank you to our three first speakers. Sadly, due to time constraints, we won't be able to have the question and answer section right now, but this channel will be open until 5:30. We encourage you to send the questions either way and also with your email, and we can send them to the speakers. And also, we will have some time around 5:20 Chilean time and 5:30 Chilean time in about an hour to answer the possible questions you have for these three speakers. So thank you all again. Now we will proceed. Italo, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Maria Paz. And now we will move to the next part of the session. We continue with Maria Julia Chiesa and her presentation about the evolution of dwelling at Brown Station, architecture, identity, and challenge in Antarctica. Welcome, Maria Julia. It's great to have you with us this afternoon.
Hi, thanks. I'm going to present. Okay. Thanks for the space. My name is Julia, and I'm doing a master on Antarctic Studies in the University of Tierra del Fuego, Antártida Islas del Atlántico Sur. I had the opportunity to work as an environmental manager at Brown Stations in the 23-24 summer campaign, and today I'm presenting part of my study of Brown Station for my final project. Although Antarctica is presented as an inhospitable territory, since the 20th century, several nations have installed stations that have been closed, lost, renovated, expanded, or rebuilt. These transformations have been conditioned by distant high logistical cost and the particularities of the territory, And in recent years, a trend towards an Antarctic style, as Victoria Nubiala and Violeta Nubiala and their colleagues defined, has become consolidated, imposing a single narrative in a particular context, such as the ATS. So, within this context, and with the modernization of Brown Station projected in the 23-24 Annual Antarctic Plan, this work analyzes the station architectural transformation process and its impact on inhabiting practices. So the analysis covers from the inauguration of the station to the present, seeking to provide tools for a renovation that recognizes its history and singularity. First of all, Brown is located in Paradise Bay in the west of Antarctic Peninsula. The geography is strongly determines the architectural possibilities because there is limited space available along the coast with rocky outcrop and a sloping layer of snow that separates Punta Proa at the right of the image, where the station was originated, from Punta Beatriz at the left, where the emergency buildings are located. So its evolution can be traced through 3 stages that are separated by 2 key events. To show these changes, new buildings and expansions will be marked in orange in the pictures and in the plans. The first stage runs from the inauguration to its transfer to the Argentine Antarctic Institute. Brown emerged within the framework of the tripartite naval agreement signed by Argentina, Chile, and UK in 1949. Without violating the agreement, the Argentine Navy built and inaugurated the Almirante Brown Naval Detachment on April 6 in 1951. So, at that time, the Orcadas Observatory, the Melchior and Deception Naval Detachments, and the General San Martin Army Base were already operating. And as we can see in these images, although there were no specific regulations, they all share similar construction characteristics, like wooden structures with cable roofs, thermal insulation, foundations leveling the rocky ground, and elevate off the ground. Also, to prevent the fire spread, separate buildings and emergency shelters were built. Brown, in particular, was organized around the main house that is in the center of the image. It was a prefabricated wooden structure with a rectangular floor plan and with similar characteristics of the other stations that I said before. So at one side was an emergency house with the same construction logic, and behind it a metal shed. Later, the station grows with the addition of a tide gauge on the coast, a melting facility above, a power plant at the east, and the extension of the main house. The emergency house that is on the left and the warehouse were also expanded, and the last one was connected to the house. At the same time, a secondary power plant was built next to the existing one. And finally, in 1956, the station reached Punta Beatriz, where the conscript Ortiz shelter was built out of wood. Although Brown carried out logistic and scientific activities, it's also important its early connection to tourism. In 1958, the Naval Transport Command organized the first tourist trips to Antarctica, being Brown one of the destinations. However, in 1960, the station was temporarily closed. So now we pass to the second stage. After closure, the detachment was transferred to the Institute Argentine and reopened as Almirante Brown Research Station on February 17 in 1965. So the reactivation was framed by the new international context of the Antarctic Treaty, which gave centrality to scientific research as a justification for the national presence. At the time of the transfer, Brown had the buildings shown before, with renovations being made in the main house and the warehouse for scientific activities. Inside the warehouse were the labs. So the station became the most diverse scientific hub among the Argentine stations, supported by building improvements. A concrete structure was built to support fuel tanks with a prefabricated shed for pumping in the southwest, an aquarium that is there was built on the foundations of the old emergency house that burned down in '68. A boathouse was installed next to the ramp. And in 1971, the emergency house was rebuilt near the Ortiz shelter, with a wooden structure raised on isolated concrete footing. The inhabitants combine logistical, scientific, and leisure activities, sharing the environment with local species and dogs, like the first settlements. The installation of a teletype also allowed Brown to interact with other Argentine stations to the point of even playing chess, as we see in the image of the left. So to end with this stage, the connection with tourism continued. Brown appeared as a representative image of Antarctica, as we can see in the publication of the left, that is from the Antarctic Institute. And in the other images, the right ones, they are from a member of the 1970 Brown crew. So the third stage began in 1984 when a fire destroyed two key buildings, the main house and the warehouse. Brown remained closed until its reopening in the summer of '88-'89, operating in summer since then. In 1995, in '96 summer campaign, two container buildings were installed, one for an oceanographic lab and one for accommodation. Both were assembled on site and placed in the same place of the old main house. The modular solution ensures fast installation while meeting Madrid protocol requirements. However, their proximity to the water turned into a not great idea. A new workshop was also built next to the containers with a mixed structure, that is the building of the right. Since then, no new buildings have been installed and several facilities stopped working or collapsed. The situation and the years of inactivity favor the establishment of penguin colonies, as shown in the image. Now there are 3 patches, as we can see in the image on the plan, and the one of the left is the place where the ramp was before, and now there are penguins all. Currently, Brown looks like this image from the peak of the hill. A working area at Punta Proa and accommodation dispersed in 3 buildings. The aquarium, one of the containers, and due to the lack of space, the emergency house that is used as the main house and has been expanded over several campaigns. So since the fire, the shared daily experience became fragmented. Today, living is also further conditioned by rules of coexistence and guidelines for visitors. When Brown is open, interaction with tourists is part of the daily dynamic. Here we can see the route allowed by the guidelines, landing at Punta Proa or Punta Beatriz and then ascending to the peak of the hill. So to end, this research shows the architectural evolution of the stations. Here we can see the 3 stages that I talk about. And on the bottom, you can see the buildings in a timeline. So Brown emerged as a geostrategic decision. In its second stage, improved the facilities in the name of science, and the 1984 fire inaugurated a period marked by the loss of an integrative spatial logic and shows limitation for full logistical and scientific development. Added to this is an increasingly restrictive international regime, and Brown, as one of the most visited stations by tourists, serves as a symbolic showcase of the Argentine presence on the continent. The 23-24 annual Antarctic Plan includes maintenance of Brown towards a modernization, but some measures reveal tensions between historical preservation and the environmental demands of the ATS. The Madrid Protocol promotes the replacement of traditional stations with lower impact architectures, like we see in these images, resulting in a certain formal uniformity characterized by self-sufficient architectures that minimize its connection with the environment. So Antarctic architecture faces the dual mandate of being environmentally sustainable while sustaining national narratives of presence and permanence. These stations are not just functional infrastructures, but spaces that embody identities, memories, and ways of living. Under the master narratives and reinforcing them, Antarctica long served as a lab for natural science, while the social ones only recently began to offer new perspectives of the territory.
Excuse me, sorry to interrupt. You
Yes.
have 1 minute left.
Yes, perfect. Meanwhile, architecture started to integrate aesthetics, granting architects a new role. The challenge is to resist standardized models that ignore its uniqueness, since every act of conserving, transforming, or replacing a station is a political gesture. In Brown, environmental politics, memory, forgetfulness, and cultural identity intersect, forcing us to consider how to inhabit Antarctica by recognizing the past, addressing the present, and projecting a plural and situated future. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Julia. Now we would like to introduce Zdenka Sokolikova, who will present Guide Who Quit When Living Becomes an Act of Environmental Care. Welcome, Zdenka. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes,
Are they
perfect.
working? Okay, I'm not sure whether you can see me though. Let me check whether I can switch on the video. I can. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Zdenka. I work as a postdoc at the Arctic Center at the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. And I'm presenting today also on behalf of my colleagues, Liz Cooper from the same department and Christy Heyer from the University of Surrey. We will be talking here about Antarctic tour guides who have deliberately decided to quit guiding in Antarctica. The outline of the presentation is as follows. I was planning to skip the intro, but maybe I'll say a few sentences to begin with, and then I will tell you more about the data and the methods that we use to analyze them, some theories that we invite in the conversation, and the main findings, and some conclusions at the very end. So you're probably all aware that tourism in Antarctica is rapidly growing. The numbers of vessels, operators, tourists are increasing, and it is a huge environmental conundrum because it is carbon very intense and has a big environmental footprint. And the tour guides are obviously very aware of this dilemma that they have to live in their daily work. What we also got to know is that there are some tour guides that are leaving the industry, and we felt it was interesting to get to talk to this particular group of people because we were assuming they would be vocal, critical, and they would be open to share their insights, which they indeed did. What we conducted was 25 semi-structured interviews. We all conducted those online with former Antarctic tour guides. Most of them worked on expedition cruise vessels. We had a variety in terms of how long they worked in Antarctica and their ages. The gender was quite balanced, but most of them came from Europe and North America, which is a slight bias because we're completely lacking the voice of Latin American tour guides and tour guides from Australia, New Zealand, for example, Oceania. The data is about a year old, and the average length of an interview was about an hour. We transcribed them and we jointly code them in the software Atlas TI. And when it comes to the streams of analysis, now there are these weird images. So the data is the elephant that you're boiling using your methods, and the rabbits are the theories that you're adding to this elephant stew. So then the data should taste like rabbit as well when you're good at adding the theory to the analysis. And how we analyzed these 25 transcripts, there were two streams that we followed. One of them was focusing on how the tour guides actually arrived to the decision to quit guiding in Antarctica. So in other words, what kind of process it was that we call moral negotiation. And the second stream of analysis was going more into the direction of the actual whys, so the very site-specific thing here. So why the tour guides decided to quit. So what were the issues within Antarctic tourism that they considered highly problematic or even unbearable? What are the theories here? So for the first part and the first paper, we worked with terms such as dilemma, which is a phenomenon that is characterized by uncertainty, conflicts, contradictions, and feelings of ambivalence. And the process of changing morals while you navigate such a dilemma is called moral negotiation. We also work with the term environmental care. Here, it's very important to underline that it's a behavior, it's an act, a practice, a doing, not just an attitude of, environmental concern. So it's doing something. We find in literature that care is always based on proximal relations. But it can go, of course, beyond just human beings. That can be non-humans like wildlife or landscapes, places. But it can also include remote places like Antarctica. And another thing that is very important for our case study is that environmental care, so care for the other, which can be a non-human entity, can be intertwined with self-care. So it's self-care is not selfishness, egoism, but it's caring about oneself, and environmental care and self-care can go hand in hand. When it comes to the analysis that follows more the stream of why, so what are the reasons for the tour guides to quit? Here we're still in the process of reading up the literature, but we find that generally in tourism sustainability discussion, workforce research is very much missing, which is quite mind-boggling because especially frontline workers like the tour guides are extremely important for the experience of the guest, of the tourist, and what kind of take-home message they bring home, which is extremely important in Antarctica. And we already heard presentations along those lines. So we're not taking a managerial perspective to this issue. So not how to solve the problem of Antarctic tour guides leaving the industry, but we're more trying to explain the phenomenon as a starting point for the sake of possibly seeking change. Because employees that are well taken care of are also more inclined to take better care of the planet. So for the first part of the analysis, which is how do tour guides arrive to the decision to quit guiding in Antarctica, we think that this image actually explains. So it's this spiral that winds up continually. You might have heard about the attitude behavior gap, which is the problem of people having a certain attitude, for example, a pro-environmental one, but not engaging in pro-environmental behavior. And our data shows that there are actually more sub-gaps that need to be bridged. Just quickly, from living in denial, which means that you kind of, either you completely deny the problem or you accept it exists, but you don't really acknowledge that there is a solution to it that needs to be followed, you can start realizing the dilemma. This is the problem-solution gap to be bridged. Once you accept that there is a solution to the problem, it doesn't mean that you immediately reach a decision. To do that, you actually need to embark on a very painful journey, which is living the dilemma, being extremely aware of it, being very reflexive, and then you might actually come to making the decision, but still stick to your business as usual, not taking action. And then the last sub-gap, decision behavior gap, means that you decide to act upon the dilemma. In the case of our tour guides, it was the act of actual quitting. So here you can see that we're trying to add something to like more of theory of moral negotiation. So this goes way beyond just Antarctic tourism, but certainly can be very relevant for other tourism contexts. While the other part of our study is very much Antarctica specific. So why? What are the reasons for the tour guides to quit? We divided those into two different kinds, structural and personal. And the first finding that I want to underline here is that both kinds of reasons are always interlinked. It's never just one. However, the structural reasons are clearly dominant. And number one is environmental reasons. In the table in the right upper corner, you can see that 24 out of 24 tour guides mentioned environmental reasons. That's a high number. Among environmental reasons, you can list global environmental reasons, such as the CO2 emissions, the carbon footprint, but also local pollution that is induced, increasing environmental risks, disturbing habitats, or disturbing wildlife. And that can be both when rules are deliberately being disobeyed, but also when rules are being followed. The second most common reason, which is structural, so sorry, I've forgotten to mention that personal means something that is very individual, that has nothing to do with the system, like my mother is elderly and I need to be close to her, can't be on the other side of the planet. Structural reasons are something that have to do with how the system of Antarctic tourism is being organized and practiced. Industry developments always have to do with changes in time, such as, the increased number of vessels and tourists and the diversification, more activities being offered, the change in clientele. Clientele as a specific reason also featured quite often. And then the next ones were safety risks management, opulence, the kind of exuberant luxury, and also greenwashing practices of the tour operators. So this is a complete list, and also the order goes according to how often these reasons were mentioned. As I said, the reasons were always interlinked, and these colorful bubbles show you the most common intertwined structural reasons. So environmental with industry development, safety risks with industry developments, and clientele with environmental reasons. Among personal reasons, we identified lifestyle and time, but also disillusionment with the concept of Antarctic ambassadorship, the alibi of doing this work in order to kind of change people's minds and worldviews and turn them into pro-environmental activists, but also very personal issues such as health and age. So those were present, but they were not decisive. I'm coming to the conclusions. So for the how part, how they arrived to the decision to quit, we would like to claim that we consider disengaging from Antarctic tourism as a high impact pro-environmental behavior, which is already as such a phenomenon that deserves further research focus. Then the process of moral negotiation, if you remember that spiral of the iceberg, is a very painful and gradual one, which is non-linear. So you shouldn't imagine this as just a linear line in time, but you can also go, wind back. And it's also open-ended. So it doesn't mean that, for example, our tour guides quit for good, such as you decide to quit eating meat because, it's good for the planet, and then you return to that.
Sorry to interrupt, Zdenka. Do you have 1 minute left? You have one.
Good. Thank you very much. And then the last point is that caring for a place here, Antarctica, and caring for oneself can both be part of environmental care. And when it comes to the whys, we think it stands out that environmental concerns are the most common reason for Antarctic tour guides to quit, at least in our sample, but also that the reasons to quit are interlinked and they do influence each other. A practical recommendation, if the industry wanted to keep the environmentally concerned guides in the industry, then one thing is sure, they should be able to voice their ethical, environmentally ethical, but also other concerns and report unethical practice without fear of repercussions, which is the case at the moment. This is everything I had for you today. Thanks for listening. And I just wanted to make a little advertisement for a sharing event of our project where we share ongoing research. This is meant specifically for the target audience of tour guides, but we don't exclude anyone. So even if researchers were interested in hearing more about our project, because we have several studies going on, then you're welcome to join. And also, if you would like to help us spread the word, please send me an email and I'll let you know more. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Zdenka. We are going to do the Q&A at the final point of the session. Now we are going to continue with the last person. Now it's time to close this day with Katie Marks and her presentation about environmental stewardship and wicked problems, identifying meaningful pathways to ambassadorships for Antarctic tourists. Welcome to Katie again.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. I should say as well, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the audience, and I wish I could say hi to all of you. So I hope you're having a good day. So yeah, my name's Katie. Today or tonight or this evening, depending on where you are, I'll be presenting on some research that I've developed with some colleagues who include Elizabeth Lean, who's here in the virtual room, Christy DeSalas, and Anne Hardy. So let's get into it. This year, quite famously, over 100,000 tourists will visit Antarctica, as they have for the last few seasons. Irrespective of how these people have travelled or with whom, almost every visitor will at some point be invited to consider becoming an Antarctic ambassador. So I'm assuming that most people in the room will be familiar with the concept, but when we talk about ambassadorship, it's usually framed as making an ongoing commitment to contribute to Antarctica's conservation or environmental stewardship. And you can see here up on the screen the LEAP model, which has been put forward by IATO, which talks about loving and respecting the region, educating others, advocating when the opportunity arises, and protecting Antarctica by making changes at home. So there's been a fair amount of scholarship on this to date, and as it's shown, any group of Antarctic tourists will contain a mixture of motivations and interests, ranging from people with, a long-standing care for and interest in Antarctica, through to those who are really just there for their seventh continent. And within these groups, given this range, not everybody will be an immediate or obvious candidate for ambassadorship, but some people will. And it's this batch of people, these potential ambassadors, that I'd really like us to focus on for this presentation. So imagine, you're an Antarctic tourist, you've just finished the trip of a lifetime. Not only have you had some amazing encounters with Antarctica and its wildlife, but you've also had a fascinating time participating in the onboard lectures. All of this has left you with a burning desire to get involved and help out when you get home. So you get off the ship, you go home, you start Googling, what can I do to help support Antarctica? And this is the news that comes up. And it's all accurate, oh dear, basically, it's no secret that Antarctica and the world really is in a bit of a difficult time right now. So what do the complexity and depth of the problems that Antarctica is facing mean for aspiring ambassadors? How can we support people in this environment to take meaningful and impactful action to support Antarctic conservation? In this paper, we argue that Antarctic conservation should be considered as a wicked problem, and that doing so in turn problematizes ambassadorship, but also offers a way forward for how we approach successful or impactful Antarctic ambassadorship. So what is a wicked problem? In brief, it was popularized by some design theorists in the 1970s. A wicked problem refers to an issue that is complex, it's dynamic, famously difficult to address or solve. Over the decades, scholars have devised a variety of typologies to define wicked problems. And however way you slice it, the challenge of Antarctic conservation fits within many of these definitions. We're talking about multifaceted, intersecting environmental and political issues, deeply interconnected problems. So a big bundle of issues, and if you try and pull on one, you pull on everything. Conflicting problem definitions, so people not even agreeing, for example, on whether emperor penguins are an endangered species or whether marine resources, what rational use looks like. These problems are also accelerating, which means that international regulations and governance frameworks must continually adapt to these emerging changes. And within this landscape, no single intervention, no single actor, be it a tourist or a scientist, can permanently resolve these challenges. Instead, we need sustained global cooperation and adaptive management. So what does this all mean for tourists? One way of examining wicked problems is to take a systems-based approach. And in this context, this would mean looking at the full system of actors, problems, networks that make up Antarctic conservation, identifying interdependencies and assembling diverse teams to work on different problems. And viewed in this light, we'd like to argue that Antarctic tourists are not solely a group of consumers from whom we might wish to seek or elicit certain attitudes or behaviours. They themselves are also actors situated within a complex network of problems, stakeholders, and relationships. And the strategies that we design to support Antarctic ambassadorship should recognise this. So based on that, we want to put forward a bit of a tentative research agenda because much of the scholarship on Antarctic ambassadorship to date has either focused on critiquing the concept or on examining the attitudes, motivations, and behaviours of tourists. And these are both of ongoing critical importance. We need to keep asking whether it's reasonable and ethical to promote ambassadorship. We need to keep asking what makes somebody want to become an ambassador and makes them act as an ambassador. But our argument is that we need a third tier, which is to say, well, once somebody is on board, how can we support them to make a positive and meaningful contribution to Antarctic conservation? In other words, what do people do as ambassadors? So to ask this question, we drew on some broader interview data that is part of some broader work that we've been doing with Intrepid Travel. So over 2 seasons, we ran semi-structured interviews with 121 Antarctic tourists. We asked a broad range of questions, but for the point of this study in particular, we asked people, what are you going to do when you get home? And it was this data that we were really interested in. We went through all of this data, all of the people expressing their post-trip desires and intentions, and asked which of these are ambassadorship aligned. And if people are wanting to do these kind of ambassadorship aligned activities, do they perceive any barriers to action? In other words, what do they think might stop them? Here's what we found. In brief, we found 6 different types of desired post-trip action that aligned with the concept of Antarctic ambassadorship. I'll go into them all in brief. So the first was the most obvious, tell other people about Antarctica. This is far and away the most prevalent theme coming out. People just said, I want to share the knowledge. It might be via telling stories, it might be via conversations at the pub, it might be via multimedia presentations or giving talks at Rotary. Number 2, engage in globally focused pro-environmental behaviour. So these are the people who went home and said, I want to do something to help the environment. It doesn't necessarily need to be focused on Antarctica because I acknowledge that all these systems are interconnected. Number 3, same deal, but this was engaging in Antarctic-focused pro-environmental behaviour. So these are the people who went home and said, I want to participate directly in Antarctic environmental issues. And at the moment, that mainly meant looking into krill supplements. Number 4, these were people who said, I want to learn more about Antarctica. They wanted to go back home and follow up on particular issues. They might have been interested in doing short courses, reading books, in some cases participating in an ongoing sense in citizen research projects as well. Number 5, I've actually missed one. So I'm just going to talk about the one I missed quickly, which is hidden behind, oh, you can't even see them. But there was a 5th, which is joining Antarctic groups. So these are the people who said, I really want to get involved in an NGO or a heritage organization. I want to add my voice to other people, or I want to donate to another group. And then finally, we've got what we call the responsible tourism advocates. These are people who said, I want to go home and either make sure that the rest of my travel, wherever I'm going, is ethical and responsible and sustainable, or I want to go home and tell people the right way to travel to Antarctica. We also found a range of barriers to action. So these are people saying, I want to do this, but I'm concerned about that. In general, there were 4. One is difficulty communicating. People were saying, look, I want to go home and tell people about Antarctica, but how do I even communicate this place? You know, people are talking about how extreme and sublime the environment is and how difficult it is to put into words or put into photos or something like that. So people were worried about capturing Antarctica in a way that would help other people fall in love with it. Another key issue was access to information. So people either indirectly or directly said, well, I want to continue learning and talking to people about Antarctica, but or promoting ambassadorship, but I don't know where to get the right information. Indirectly as well, people told us that they were not necessarily in possession of the correct action because we saw a number of people propagating misinformation, such as the idea that the treaty system is coming to an end in 2048. Another issue was people saying they felt overwhelmed, they needed time to process. They'd be like, oh, I might want to do something, but how do I fit all of this experience into my own head and my own life? And then finally, and critically, people said, I don't know what to do. So we found a real lack of clarity around what actions people could take. And I think this guest here really summed it up well. They said some of these problems are so enormous and overwhelming. You know, everybody knows they should abstractly care about them, but unless you have a specific concrete entry point, sometimes it's hard to figure out. So in brief, that's our findings. Let's talk about what it means. Based on these findings, we've established a preliminary typology that outlines 6 different types of ambassadors. So you can see them here. We think that you can be an Antarctic storyteller, a global environmental champion, Antarctic environmental champion, an enthusiast, i.e. the learners, collective action champions, these are the group joiners, and then responsible tourism advocates. This typology is based on the notion that there is not one way of being an Antarctic ambassador, but there are many. These types might overlap, and certainly one person might be more than one type. But there is no reason to believe that one individual can encompass all 6 types. And indeed, that might be difficult in any life.
Excuse me, Katie, you have
Is that 1 minute?
left. Yes.
All right, cool. So the LEAP model, which we spoke about earlier, assumes that its qualities kind of sit across all, embody a single individual. But what our findings suggest is that it might be better to understand these qualities as representing important contributions to Antarctic stewardship that are spread across a group of people. And what this means is that strategies to support ambassadorship should be tailored. Another finding, there are multiple conditions to success. So people told us what the barriers were. We think that these are some of the things that will help people succeed. I won't speak about them all in detail given the time limits. I want to focus on the last 2 because the first 3 really relate to individual capacity building. We've spoken about that before in the scholarship. But we think that one of the most important things is having clear and achievable actions, which is why we've started to develop a multi-level model for different actions that people can take as ambassadors. You notice that this is mapped to the 6 different types. We think that if we can start to come up with ideas of what people can do, starting at home with yourself, moving up in terms of influencing the community, influencing industry, influencing government, it might actually start to provide a clear way forward. We see a lot of potential as well to map these types of actions to different stakeholders as well. So we can start to look at who in the sector and beyond the sector can help ambassadors to be effective in all of these different actions. Next steps, basically, we need to test this with a broader sample. We'd love to do an action research project with tour operators to design and test some of these different actions against each different type of ambassador and see what works. There's also a strong need for further study to understand how ambassadorship intersects with things like gender, socioeconomic status, cultural and linguistic background. Lots of work to be done. That's me. Thank you very much. And I'm going to try and...
Thank you very much for your second presentation, Katie. Now, Maria Paz will lead the Q&A session for all of these afternoon presentations. And you can put your questions in the right part of the board.
Thank you, Italu, and thank you to all of our speakers from today. We have a few minutes left, so we will be able to do the questions and answers. So we have a couple of questions already, but we encourage you to make some others if you want to, if possible. And if we don't have the time to answer them all, then you can also put your emails and we can send them to the speakers. So first question from Ria Olivier is for Katie Marks. So I invite you to put on your video camera again if possible. Thank you. Ria is asking, Katie, will you draw up a manual, or this is about your first presentation from today. Katie, will you draw up a manual document that this can be applied to, I heard gateway cities, for example, Cape Town? Do you think an action group for gateway cities needs to be established in SCAR?
Oh, okay. There's two great questions there, Ria. I don't think she's in the room anymore, but for everybody else, yes, we will be collecting our findings at the end of the project. We hope to publish a couple of papers on them, but we also hope to publish or disseminate our finding in a less in a less academic way. So we're, for example, hoping to run an online seminar where interested people can come and hear about what we've learned. In terms of a action group on gateways within SCAR, we're certainly seeing a lot of interest in different fora around establishing a gateway focus. We're seeing it, for example, within the ATCM right now. Perhaps that's something that we should chat about next year in Norway. So if anyone is interested in doing some work on this across SCAR, get in contact with us and we'll see what we can do.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. There's another question for you, but I will give the floor to Zenka first. There's a question from Elizabeth Lian. She says, thanks, Zenka, really interesting. Did you find that the particular operator influence guides as reasons for quitting? For example, opulence would not apply to all. I invite you to reply if possible.
Yes, thank you, Ellie, for the question. So we had a rather wide range of operators that the quitters used to work for. And like from the top of my head, I don't have the feeling that we had one or two operators that would be more represented than others. And we haven't really checked for this particular factor. But I also have the feeling that opulence of some sort is present in Antarctic tourism, no matter what kind of tour operator it is. However, also the tour guides were very aware that, for example, they worked for a tour operator who did not attract the very high-end clientele, but they heard from their colleagues who were working for other tour operators that were attracting those really very wealthy people that were looking for an extreme luxury. And even, those stories could have featured in their decisions, or kind of maybe discussed even at this kind of opulence that is so mismatching the environment where these tourist practices are happening. Yeah, but a short answer to your question is no, we don't know, and we haven't really looked for that factor.
Thank you so much for your answer. And now we have one last question from actually from Zenka to Katie Marks. So if again you can put on your video. She's asking, what is the difference between custodianship, stewardship, and ambassadorship?
Fabulous question, and it kind of cuts across both of my presentations, doesn't it? Custodianship has, at least in recent times, initially been employed in Gateway's discourse to define the type of relationship, or the ideal type of relationship, that Gateway City residents have with Antarctica. The Antarctic Cities project put forward custodianship as a term based on the idea that the original thinking around gateways really framed gateways as just places where people who are going to Antarctica stop in and out, and it's basically just a point of passing through, and not necessarily a site with its own Antarctic social, economic, cultural systems. So that model kind of marginalized residents a little bit. So custodianship in this context was employed to suggest that there is scope for a deeper and more active relationship within cities, and particularly gateway cities, with Antarctica. And there's actually a forthcoming book called Antarctic Cities, which you should keep an eye out for. It'll be reporting on all of these findings. So that's been employed traditionally in a gateway space. We did actually, when we were talking about what term we would use, raise the idea of ambassadorship back in kind of like 5 or 6 years ago. I think we moved away from that because it wouldn't translate so well across all of the different gateway languages, but custodianship tended to be okay. Then we've got ambassadorship, which is used in a tourism context, and as we see, kind of the definitions of what that does or doesn't mean is evolving I think fundamentally they can and should mean the same thing. So maybe there is scope to try and unify our terms a little bit. There was a really good paper on ambassadorship a few years ago, but I think Karen Alexander led it, which made the point that you don't have to go to Antarctica to be an ambassador as well. And interrogating the differences and similarities between how we frame custodianship and ambassadorship highlights that point. So yeah, I see potential to kind of explore those differences and similarities a little bit more, but generally I think they're the same concept, they're just employed in different discourses. Hope that helps.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. That concludes our Q&A for today. And before closing today's session, I would just like to remind you that you can find in our website, specifically in the part of the registration part, you can find the link for tomorrow's session. So with no further ado, I'll give the floor to Italo so we can close today's transmission.
Thank you, Maria Paz. Thank you all for your questions and participation. This concludes the first day of our live broadcast on Channel 2. The channel is now signing off. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you all.